thank you for coming back to our Girls Inc. STEM series of videos. I am joined here today with Ms. Kristal, and she is the Operation Smart Program Specialist here at Girls Inc. of Greater Philadelphia and Southern New Jersey. And I'm so excited to talk to her because I love her, she's the best, but also because I want to pick her brain about her experience in STEM, both in undergrad, before, and the potential to move on to grad school. And she's just the coolest. So thanks for coming, Ms. Kristal. So excited to have you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kristal. Nice to meet y'all. Like she said, Operation Smart Program Specialist. I am from Puerto Rico and then to Massachusetts and then came back down here for college, which I went to Bryn College, and I got my degree just recently in math with my triple minors in child and family studies, education, and Africana studies. So of course that in itself is a mouthful. I'm very excited to be here, of course. And I think that just about rounds up your questions, Ms. Sarah.
Yeah. Well, so how exactly did you find Girls Inc? How did you get here? What was that like?
Awesome. So like I said, I do go to Bryn College, and we had originally when I started as a math major, I was like, I'm not sure if I want to do education because I'm not sure if I want to be a math teacher. And then they had a informal / non-formal STEM education panel that they had going on. So they said they were going to have different agencies and organizations coming in to speak to us a little bit more about how they work with non-formal education. So of course I was like, well, I don't want to be a teacher necessarily maybe, but I do want to see what that looks like in terms of opportunities. So I had joined in, and it was for a science and math pedagogy and curriculum class itself. So I wasn't in the class because I wasn't able to get in because I wasn't a senior yet, but I was still interested in formal education. And that's where I met our director, Sharice Arrington, who had spoken to us about what Girls Inc. was, and immediately I fell in love with it as a woman of color, in STEM. It was calling to me in various ways, and specifically just knowing that I would be able to support girls of color and be able to supply them with some form of interest within math and STEM in general, and as well as be able to support them outside of formal education, because of course formal education is important, but being able to fill in the gaps that are being created either through formal education or as a result of is also just as important. And I felt like that is where I could thrive in the most, since in my own experiences from mentors and past relationships, it was those that helped me sort of fill in those gaps that continued my interest in STEM.
Before college, maybe in elementary school, middle school, high school, were you always interested in STEM? Were you always the math girl? What was your experience like with STEM growing up?
That's a wonderful question as well. Normally, growing up, of course, I loved math. I think math came very easily to me, so I was able to interact with math in different ways. I always liked understanding the how and the why component of math. So whenever they'd say like, this is what you do, and you just do it because of whatever reason, whether it's an equation or a formula, and you just apply it. I always wanted to understand, why does that work? Why does that relate? Why does that matter? And I think I had the opportunity for a variety of different female math teachers, most importantly, that sort of set that representation to start with for me. And then we're able to use all of my questions and try to answer them and help me sort of challenge whatever questions and whatever confusion I may have had. So then instead of seeing math as something that was troublesome and challenging, I saw it as something that was, it required perseverance, but I was also able to really relate to myself and all of my interests. So as somebody who also loved art growing up, I loved understanding how math was hidden behind the art. So of course I can give you geometry and give you shapes, but I can also give you something like Fibonacci sequence, and you can see shells and understand it relates to the ocean and so many other things of your identities. Which I also always enjoyed, that I was able to sort of take in math and say, okay, but how does it relate to the real world? But how can I relate to my own world? And how can I use it to help others? I also have 5 younger siblings, which is sort of a fun fact to point out. So when it came to having those younger siblings with a variety of different learning disabilities and having to apply something like math or STEM, which is normally very difficult to already understand and to interpret, then having to do that with my own curiosity, I was able to sort of apply it back into my siblings. So I was seeing math as a roundabout and something that was constantly revolving around my own lifestyle, even though I didn't see it as something that I wanted to do myself in the future. Mm-hmm. And then as time continued, I had 2 specific math teachers that were really big mentors to me. I had one in 6th grade that sort of helped me get into my high school, because she saw that I had excelled in my grades, and she wanted me to do something that allowed me to have the opportunity with math in a more personal way as opposed to just academically. And from there, she transitioned me on to my 7th through 12th grade teacher, which was Shaman, one of my best friends and my mentors, who really taught me the importance of math, especially as a woman of color, and how math and STEM in general would be able to benefit me, and how I would be able to use that to my advantage to be able to help my siblings and support them, but also to be able to make a lifestyle and a career out of it eventually. So while I continued to excel in math, as it got more difficult throughout high school, my math teacher was a very strong foundation for me because I was able to sort of review with her, continue to try mind challenges, think about my curiosity, and then use all of those experiences as well as things that I was able to implement into my siblings and into other teachings, to continue to really have that strong bond and relationship with math. So I think math was sort of the largest foundation that allowed me to segue into different bridges and different relationships that I've been able to formulate and keep for the past 6+ years.
So what you mentioned about, finding someone or a teacher or a way to make a subject relate to your life made something that might not be as interesting much more relatable, and something that you thought, oh, this is something I could be curious about for a long while. So is there
Mhm.
any advice that you have, or any tidbit of information that, if somebody's looking for that inspiration to stick with the subject or stick with the topic,
Yeah.
but can't really find it just yet, and that might be a little bit of an existential question, but if there's anything that comes to mind, I think that would be a really cool thing to pick your brain about.
Yeah, for sure. That's a wonderful question. So, two big pieces of advice that I have. One, I think that all math teachers, um, to some extent, have that love and passion for math and want for you to be able to enjoy and sort of bring that additional spark of interest in you, to be able to connect with math or STEM in general. So, that could be a science teacher, a math teacher, if you have a technology teacher, if you have an engineering teacher, or anywhere within that subject. I think to start off sort of in a roundabout, the first piece of advice is that STEM is everywhere. So you can really relate to STEM in any aspect. Like I said, my first thing was art. As an artist, I think a lot of us enjoy whether it's music or drawing, or even watching movies, and being able to understand the mathematical or the STEM component behind it was something that immediately made it relevant to me, because then I could see, oh, this drawing is about anatomy, understanding how to draw people is about understanding shapes, which again, then I saw it more of like, oh, I'm enjoying art and understanding some of the math behind it, as opposed to I'm learning math and trying to apply it into art. So in any way that you can see, okay, I like STEM, I like some component of STEM, or even if I don't think that it's STEM, what do I like and what is the STEM behind it? Because again, STEM is everywhere, even from something as basic as money. If we all like money, money is still about understanding counting, probability, statistics, and sort of all of that umbrella of encompassing math concepts. And then that comes to the second part of, again, I always want to say that there's a guarantee that there's at least one teacher in your school, especially a STEM teacher, that wants to support you in your own STEM career, because we understand that STEM careers will pay more. We understand that STEM careers are, again, in everything. So even if you're an artist, you're still a STEMness in that same regard, because you're understanding anatomy, shapes, and etc. So
Mhm.
if you feel like you don't have it or you can't find it, looking for it, it's really one of those things that, especially as a woman and a woman in STEM, understanding where our place is and that our place is in STEM, and knowing how to advocate for ourselves and speak up for ourselves. And if you feel like, well, I don't know how to do that yet, looking for somewhere like a program like Girls Inc., where we're more than happy to provide you with additional skills and additional supports to provide you with those resources and to provide you with the opportunity to ask for help, but also even asking or bringing up your interest in STEM to one of your teachers. I guarantee that as soon as you say, hey, I'm interested in math or I'm interested in science, they'll immediately sort of have a little light bulb that says, I can help you. How can I help you? And they'll try to offer you those steps, because they understand that as a person interested in STEM, it's already difficult regardless of where you are, and all the challenges that come with being a woman and a woman of color also interested in STEM. And more importantly, because they understand you might not have that representation, become that representation. So if you're like, I'm interested in STEM, but I don't really know what that looks like, or I don't really know, I haven't really seen people that look like me in STEM. Again, STEM isn't everywhere, so maybe we just didn't see it in informal STEM spaces. And B, then become that person so that other people in the next generation and even in your generation can look at you to be that example.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just, I could go on all of these tangents just from this conversation, but I do have a couple of questions that feel like also, anything I ask and anything you say is beyond valuable. But some different questions in different parts of your STEM journey. So want to move on to those. So we're still talking a little bit before college. How did you know what major you wanted to do? You knew you liked math, you knew it was interesting and subject matter, but how did you choose the actual mathematics route? You could have gone in any of the routes that you were mentioning before, but what made you realize like, this is what I want to do?
I think most college students, when they start thinking about their majors, they think about their strengths as well as their interests. So what am I really interested in that I would want to do in my life as a career? And what are things that I have already seen to be my strengths that I can sort of acquire and develop and strengthen and continue to build as a foundation? So like I said, I did have the honor and the privilege of having resources, whether it was teachers and counselors and mentors that did sort of navigate me and continue to uh, encourage me to go through the path and pursue the path of math. And in the same way, it was one of my strengths or something that I loved enough that even when I felt as if though I know, for example, I took AP calculus in senior year and I got a 1, I got probably the lowest score in terms of expectations. And so, of course, confidence wise, that was deteriorating to my confidence. But I understood that I loved math enough to know that regardless of what came in the way of it, I wanted to try to excel in it. I understood that when it came to having a degree, it did not matter the expectations that others had set for me. So it didn't matter the grades that I got, but it mattered the passion that I had for it. And again, the motivation to want to excel and to thrive and persevere. So at first, I was like, I don't want to be a math major because if I'm a math major and do education, then I'll have to be a teacher. And teaching is great in the same ways that in terms of opportunity and upward mobility, I knew that I could also excel into like accounting, but I wasn't really good at finances. So I said, okay, well, let's just start with the basics of math. I know that I want to do STEM. And I know that, again, in terms of my strengths and my interests, math is the highest one out of the rest of the STEM fields. So then I started doing research to see what that would look like and started going into the requirements. And I started to think about my old mentors, inclusive of, again, this high school math teacher that I had, and started sort of reaching out to any of my old supports and trying to develop and establish supports in my school, whether that meant other students that were also interested in math degrees, current math majors that were already in the math degree, and asking them for their own advice, as well as trying to develop some kind of mentorship relationship, because I understood that the ways that I got into math and interested in STEM in the first place came from those really strong relationships and those really strong mentorships that continue to encourage me and guide me and remind me that A, my grade does not define me. So regardless of what grade I get, I can still excel as a math major. B, that math is about the understanding of the passion that you have for it. It's not about how well you do or being the best. It's really knowing that I have the passion for it. So regardless of whether I make a mistake, I can come back to it and learn from that. And C, understanding that my mistakes are what make me great. So as a mathematician, math, the entire STEM field would not exist if we didn't make mistakes. We wouldn't understand how to excel if we didn't make mistakes from that. So being in a space that prepared me to go into the real world, which I felt like math was that first foundation for, then said, I already know how to relate it to myself. I already know how to make connections to it. I already know or have the working knowledge of, even though I didn't know all of it, because again, that's not part of what the point of it is just knowing that I had some working knowledge and had the passion for to try to make it into what it would be. But I will say, in all honesty, I had no idea what that would turn into. So, like I said, up until it came to the informal STEM education panel, I didn't even know about Girls Inc. or about informal STEM education. So I thought, okay, I could be a math teacher, but what are my other opportunities and where does that go? And so that is sort of where I have the belief of throwing it to the universe or to God, and knowing that I can do my part in continuing to try to excel to my own expectations and into continuing to motivate myself and follow that passion that I have in whatever subject that may be, and trying to find additional interest in there. So I started as a math major and I knew that that was what I wanted to follow up with, especially because statistics told me that as a woman of color, I would not excel and I wanted to beat those statistics. And B, then I thought, okay, well, what else do I like and what do I want to sort of navigate through in terms of concentrations in math? And that's where my education minor, my Africana studies minor, my child and family studies minors all sort of came in, because it was like, okay, I have math, which is my biggest foundation. And now I can sort of relate that umbrella to my education minor. I can relate it to child and family studies and apply it back to my siblings and myself, so that not only is my math degree doing something for me in terms of finances and again excelling in terms of society, I also can, if all else fails, apply it back to my family and to myself. And then in the same way, Africana studies, sort of understanding identity and understanding that it appeals to the people that I want to serve, and that's for me predominantly BIPOC students, because I understand statistically where they're least resourced, where they're least supported, where they're least probable in terms of statistics to excel and to continue to perform in the STEM fields. So then I thought, how can I sort of encompass all of the knowledge that I have and bring it back? And more importantly, I thought, what can I do with this education that would have made my own education experience easier? And whether that meant, again, supporting my siblings or understanding the different math components, because once you go higher into any STEM field, you start to understand the more basic things like what's a plane, what's a period, what's a point, and etc. But really being able to know that at the end of the day, this was my education and that it was something that I could bring back to myself and use to build a foundation for myself and for the others that I want to serve and represent.
Yeah. So from what I'm gathering there, and I think some of the key takeaways of that are just the idea of being flexible, right? So you went in with a pretty sound idea of what you wanted to do with your math degree, but then
For
also
sure.
allowing yourself to have the opportunity to find something else. And I think that's
Hmm.
huge. And not even find something else, but collaborate with something else. I know we talk a
Hmm.
decent bit about STEM being interdisciplinary, and I think that's really just highlighted through what you were saying in your experience in total. And also networking, which kind of is a good segue
Mm.
into my next question. So at Bryn Mawr, were you involved in any clubs or societies or maybe particular classes or research opportunities that really made your experience greater or open your eyes to something that maybe you didn't know about before you entered college?
For sure. Yes. So I didn't join any like specific STEM organizations. There wasn't many provided for me. And if there was, they were sort of already within the majors. But I was able to join um, organizations for BIPOC students. So I joined BICASO, which is the Black and Caribbean ancestry student organization. I was able to sort of dabble with some of my friends into their clubs as well. So like Sisterhood was another one that we had. And it was basically more for the representation and the support. So again, being able to have that network of other women and women of color that were also either math degrees or STEM degrees or were pursuing their STEM degrees and seeing how they were going about it. I think the power of solidarity is very strong, and Bryn Mawr really taught me that, especially again as somebody in terms of statistics who is not shown and we don't see in terms of representation. Having other women present that representation for me was very important to me because I have grown up around that. So
Absolutely.
like Picasso, having my own identity crisis that I had during college, which most college students might have, was very helpful to know that I had that solidarity, that support, and people that were rooting for me, even if I was questioning my own confidence in that part in those moments. Um, in that same way, I had two math professors that when I started off, I didn't do the best in terms of my grades. And so I thus didn't excel in my own expectations and I was able to communicate with them and explain to them that I was concerned or I was frustrated or I was confused. And I was able to develop a very strong relationship with one of them in particular, who was also my major advisor or eventually became my major advisor, who
Mhm.
I was able to communicate, hey, math is confusing, math is difficult. I understand my own learning pace and my own learning abilities to know that I'm able to do anything, but I need some more time to be able to learn it. And she was able to provide me with times for office hours. I was able to make a relationship and that bond with her for again representation, but also knowing that if I wasn't in her class, I could still ask her for support. Since again, with most STEM things, it's a lot about confidence and having the confidence in yourself to know that you will excel because that's what we are here for as women and a woman of color, women in STEM in general. It is made for us. And because of representation or lack thereof, I questioned it at times. So having both women in my own college experiences that were college students that were doing it, as well as women that had, in this particular case, this professor graduated from Bryn Mawr so plus years ago. So she was able to sort of pull me and go through the ropes and guide me and remind me that I have done it, so you can do it. And I'm here to support you, to remind you that I'm constantly rooting for you, which was very important to me since throughout the course of Bryn Mawr, there was a lot of challenges that came in with my math degree, whether it was completing or getting the grades necessary or etc. So when confidence was down, motivation was down, encouragement was down, but having the supports that sort of kept you up and held you up was very important.
Absolutely. And I think that's highlighting something that mm, I don't want to make a blanket statement, but a lot of college students or, high school, younger students don't maybe feel comfortable doing or having
Mhm,
the ability to advocate for themselves, but
mhm,
asking for help, relying on, or not relying on your network, asking your connections, asking your mentors, even your fellow students, your peers, can we go over something or can we
mhm.
talk about this in just a different way? Do you think you could explain it to me? And I think what you were saying there is just so powerful, especially hearing from a young person, I think is huge. So my next question is kind of twofold. So we didn't really even get into it, but I'll ask the question and then see how we can try to fuse this a little bit. Okay. So, what do you believe the biggest misconception about people who have your major, or what, okay, starting over. What do you think the biggest misconception is about people in your major, and particularly women in your major? And maybe you can speak to the Bryn Mawr experience since, it's all women in your classes.
For sure. I think it depends on which route you want to go. So again, I think the biggest misconception when it comes to math majors in general is that you're either a teacher or you're an accountant. Like if you're not in finance or you're not in education, then there's no space for you in math, which is absolutely absurd, especially because math is the foundation of anything that we go in the STEM field, in the humanities. You use math in everything that we work in. So that idea that if you go into get your math degree, you only have the option of being a teacher or being an accountant or in finance, again, is absolutely absurd. It's not statistically correct. You have as a person who has a math degree, you then have the opportunity to excel and venture off into anything because again, STEM is in everything and math, you need math in order to understand science. And you can understand science or you can understand math without the science because again, math is a really crucial foundation. So if you ever think, oh, I don't know what I want to do with my math degree, the options are literally endless. Once you have received your degree, the options are unfold for you in a way that I didn't envision myself. And even if you say, I do want to go into education or I do want to go into accounting, even that is a huge umbrella. So in education, do you want to be a teacher? Do you want to be a facilitator? Do you want to be a counselor? Do you want to be a support? Do you want to be a mentor? Do you want to go into finance? Do you want to be an accountant? Do you want to be an advisor? Do you want to work with websites? Do you want to work with people? There's just so many options that sort of come with it. So that was definitely one of the biggest things. And in the same way, the second one, of course, being that as a woman and as a woman of color, that we're not supposed to be in math or that we don't belong here, as opposed to y'all just don't represent us. Y'all being the larger society doesn't represent us enough because we are here all the time. You see us even if we're not represented properly in there. So the scientists, the doctors, the nurses, all of the larger jobs as well as the less known jobs are also led by women. It's just that stereotype that women and women of color aren't supposed to be in STEM for whatever reason. In that same regard, I think you had a second part of that question for me.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what it was.
No worries. So just can you speak to your experience at Bryn Mawr with all of your classes? I'm not sure that those viewing this video would know, but could you explain kind of the Bryn Mawr experience? Can you explain the student body and who are in your classes? What is the student body comprised of, or who rather is the student body comprised of?
Makes sense. In case somebody who is watching this doesn't know, so I go to Bryn Mawr. As I said, Bryn Mawr is an all-women's college. Bryn Mawr is historically also predominantly white. Bryn Mawr itself is encompassing of a variety of students. Again, the majority, you have to have identified as a woman when you were accepted into Bryn Mawr. So that means that we're also inclusive of anyone in the LGBTQI community. So if you transition in the midst of Bryn Mawr, as long as you identify as a woman coming into it, then you can be applicable to join us at Bryn Mawr. The predominance, like I said, is white. However, there is still like 30% of our students are international. And then of course there's the additional in terms of statistics. I try to surround myself predominantly with women of color because I wanted that representation for myself. And because I knew that in terms of my own experiences, that's where I felt like we were most under resourced and we were most high need spaces. So being able to surround myself with other women that I thought might have similar experiences to me was important. But being surrounded by all women in general always felt enlightening. So being in a math class and going into college being very fearful that I would be the only woman and the only woman of color in that class was definitely something that sort of made it iffy in terms of getting my math degree. But knowing that I did have the honor of going to an all women's college and I had the privilege of having a scholarship that covered for the predominancy of it, so that when I had to work, I was able to balance my school life, my work life, and my responsibilities. And then going into a classroom and seeing just all women first and foremost immediately gave me that sort of set of confidence of like, oh, wow, we normally don't see this in the media. We don't see this in representation. I envisioned this, but I never really thought that it would be the case until however many years down the line. But here I am surrounded by all of these women. And then that same idea that, again, we sort of had that shared experience as being labeled as women by society. So sort of having that representation and again, that solidarity of knowing you are not alone. You are not the only one that is confused, especially in a STEM degree where a lot of the times, if you are not confused in the beginning, then maybe you're not paying enough attention. Because I think a lot of it comes from confusion and trying to make sense of the confusion, and understanding that, again, mistakes are great. So not only was I surrounded by women in my classes, a lot of my professors, both STEM and non-STEM, were also women. So seeing like, hey, you made it, your representation for me, I can make it. And again, just like having this particular professor that I had, Leslie Chang, reminding me like, I made it from Bryn Mawr here specifically as a woman of color interested in STEM, and I'm here to support you and provide you that foundation so that when you don't have the confidence for it, I will relinquish that confidence onto you because I know that you can make it as well. So that even when I had, say, a white male professor, which is also statistically predominantly what STEM teachers are consisted of, they also were very aware of my opportunities and or the challenges and limitations that came from me being a woman of color, and whatever background I come from. So in particular, for example, the professor that had taught the pedagogy and science class that I then first met Girls Inc. for the informal STEM panel was a white male professor, but he himself was aware, both culturally and academically, of the things that are needed to support women and women in STEM. So I didn't feel as if though I was targeted or I was isolated even by professors that quote unquote wouldn't represent me in terms of my image. So I constantly felt empowered by women, both professors and of course by my students or
For sure.
co-students.
For sure. So my next question is, were there any standout classes, maybe a standout class or a few, that really were just exciting and you didn't know would either be part of your college experience, maybe part of your major, and why those were so interesting or important to your undergraduate experience?
I took one like intro to dance class, and originally I didn't know it was a dance class. It was an art class, and because I knew that with my requirements as a STEM major that there was already so much being filled up in my schedule, I was like, but I do, like I said, originally my interest in math came from art, and I want to be able to sort of relate back to my art career into some aspect. So I had taken what I thought was an art class, and then they were like, no, it's actually a dance class. And at first I was very weird about it because I was like, I'm not a dancer. I mean, I can dance, do a little 1, 2, but that's as much as I can go. However, immediately she was like, she sort of asked, like, what degree are you in? And then she started relating all of her class content to our degree. So she asked us, like, okay, what degree are you, a math degree? Awesome. So we spent one class time where we started doing dances based off of like semicircles or understanding how to copy a pattern in a rectangle on the ground. So essentially, she was incorporating all of our degrees and the studies that we're looking at into it, which again, I already knew that STEM wasn't everything, but really being able to see it by somebody who is an expert in the
And
field
do it.
and being able to connect to it, I was like, oh,
Mhm.
so I'm not crazy, this is it. And then again, I
Mhm.
was able to apply it back to my siblings to say something even simple as like, let's do some Zumba and we're gonna do the math behind it. And
Right.
they look at me like I'm crazy, but I would be able to explain it to them and sort of make that connection. And of
Right.
course, again, I wouldn't have pictured myself taking it because I didn't picture myself taking a dance class, and
Right.
nor did I think that I would have the time in my schedule to take an art class. But seeing that, and more importantly, her being also another woman and a woman of color, and telling me like, I also excelled in my math degree, but I used my math degree to turn it into an art and dancing career, and being able to sort of understand that Venn diagram and that bridge and seeing it in person immediately gave me that representation and that confidence to know if I want to do math now and I'm not sure what I want to do with it, I can still take it and use it to benefit me in bringing it right back to art, which is originally what was my interest in the first place. And
Right.
knowing that it would provide sort of that financial stability for me. Because I think our biggest fear as college students is like, once I graduate, what do I do with it? How do I make sure that
Mhm.
I'm able to
Mhm.
pay and survive and continue to thrive in society? So being able to see that, and then again, being able to see that that's what I wanted to be as well. So knowing, okay, well, from there, it sort of gave me that confirmation that I wanted to be an education teacher, that I wanted to be a math teacher to some degree,
Mhm.
because then I could see that it wasn't just the one thing that I had been taught to be limited to one thing,
Right.
but knowing that even as a teacher in math, I could excel to so many things. And it was sort of just that, like, you're a cool math teacher. I want to be a cool math teacher. And now I can see
Mhm.
how I can do that in an art class or in a dance class too.
Right. Right. And connecting with students, and maybe it isn't art, maybe it isn't, whatever that placeholder interest of a student is, kind of relating it back to the subject matter, I think is just something that is so important for students to hear and
For
for
sure.
people to say, this is what I'm going to do. So I think it's just really, really great. And especially just hearing these stories, which you don't often hear so much. So I have two final questions. Um, The first one is, what do you think are the best leadership skills that you acquired during your time as a math major, with also your minors, and just kind of, you just graduated, so I don't want to put you too much on the spot, but what are some of the biggest leadership skills that stick out to you?
That is a harder question, but immediately once you said it, I think the first one is open-mindedness, and whatever that may mean to you is really just setting the foundation for yourself to know that essentially, like, my comfort zone, if it's a circle, is in dashes. It's not one solid line, meaning that I have the space to really venture outside of that comfort zone as much as I feel
Yeah.
like. So open-mindedness, I think, is one thing. Patience and compassion go hand in hand, especially in the STEM degrees, understanding that your learning pace will look differently every single time, understanding that you have to have the patience to work with yourselves, and if you want to work with others and being representations for others, knowing that again, different people learn at different paces and in different ways. So being able to apply different learning styles and different learning paces is something
Mhm.
that requires a lot of patience, whether it's for yourself, for teaching your siblings, for teaching your students, for teaching even your friends, even a classmate. If you're doing some kind of group project, requires patience. So then with having that open-mindedness, understanding, okay, I'm going to be patient. And if I lack a little bit of patience, I'm open-minded and I'm understanding that people grow at their own paces. And then compassion, most importantly, having the compassion, self-compassion, and the compassion for others. Again, really understanding I learn at my own pace. I will not understand everything the first time around, but I do have the ability to be open-minded and to be patient as I continue to learn what that might mean, and being practicing that self-compassion so that when I didn't feel as confident, when I didn't feel as like as much of a mathematician, when I felt like things, whether it was statistics or whether it was myself coming at me, I felt like
Mhm.
I had the compassion to look at myself and say, hey, you are doing great. Remember to be patient with yourself. Remember to be open minded. And remember that where you are at now does not determine where you will be at then, especially because in my time at Girls Inc., in my time at Bryn Mawr, I saw the majority of women that I saw that were in STEM. I have yet to see one woman that was like, oh yeah, it was a straight path. It was really linear into whatever
Mhm.
position was in terms of like a math graph or a chart that you would see. It was all over the place. It was all
Right.
scatter plot. It was all in different places, like four-dimensional, all of that good. So it really taught me, hey, they've done it. And the ways that they've done it have required the big things of being open minded, of understanding how to be patient with yourself and others, and practicing continuously and consistent self compassion so that when things might not go the way that you anticipated them to go, you understand that they are still going to go the way that you wanted it to go because it's what you were able to excel into your degree.
Mhm. Absolutely, absolutely. I think that if that could be like a billboard everywhere, I think we would probably get a lot further in society. Okay, and so my final question is, why STEM for girls? Why is it important? Why should girls be math majors? Why should girls be STEM majors? Why? Why?
Why not? If you are up to this part of the interview, then I'm sure you're also probably a woman interested in STEM or somehow understanding how it relates to whatever interest you may have formally already decided. But why not? It's like, I mean, nobody asks like, oh, why is a man not in STEM, or like, why is a man of color not in STEM? Because as humans, if you're a human, if you consider yourself a human, you belong in STEM, because anything is STEM. And anything that's not STEM is also STEM. And if you don't see STEM, I guarantee you, if you ask either a STEM person or somebody that you don't think is STEM, they'll find the STEM in it. You want to do dancing, you want to do designing, you want to do makeup, you want to do construction, you want to do fashion, whatever it is that you want to do, there is STEM in there. So the question really is, why should women get their education? Because education is power, because knowledge is power. So you should get your education because it's something that will help you pursue whatever passion you have in life. And because STEM is in everything, whatever education you decide to get will be that. And that is really for you to decide, what does education look like to me, and understanding how to excel in that. But knowing that, again, anything you do will be STEM. You as a woman belong in STEM. That is never a question. That is more of a statement that other people might question, but that is where you set the representation for yourself, or you look for others that can represent you. Because I guarantee you that even though you might not see it, whether in the media or you might not know about it yet, if all else fails, there's myself and plenty of women that I can think of that will represent you visually, socially, and etc. to show you that you belong in STEM entirely.
Awesome. Miss Crystal, is there anything I didn't ask you that you're like, you should have asked me this? I've been waiting to say it. I need to say it, or I don't know if there are any closing remarks.
The biggest thing really is that you set your own expectations. I think as a woman, and if y'all haven't guessed yet, I'm actually naturally loud. I think that there's this stereotype of like,
Oh.
oh, if you're loud, you're this, that, and the third. And if and when you see a stereotype come by your way, or somebody tries to put you and label you under a stereotype, know that you will always be able to dismantle and challenge it, because that is what you are, especially as a woman. And B, knowing that you will excel by your expectations. So whatever degree you decide to follow in, whatever career you decide to pursue, knowing that it is not the expectation that is set on you by your supervisor, that is not set on you by your academic advisor, it's not set on you by your family or by anybody else. You decide what your skill is, what your spectrum is, and what that means for excelling. And if all else fails, mistakes are great. Again, we would not be anywhere if we did not mistakes. You can look up anywhere in history, you can look up anywhere in STEM. We would not be here if we didn't make mistakes to learn from that. So if you're feeling like I'm making a mistake or I've made many mistakes, then that just tells you that you're growing, that you're learning, and that you're excelling in the ways that you should, at least in my expectations, which are hopefully in similarity.
I think so. I think everybody should run with that. I think that's just this whole conversation. I really feel ready to run through a brick wall. I'm like, should I have been a math major now? I don't know. We'll talk about that in maybe another time and place. But if not, Ms. Kristal, thank you so much. I hope everybody took away some really great points about being interested in STEM, having flexibility. And again, I think compassion for yourself is just one of the hugest takeaways from this chat. My name is Miss Sarah, and this is Ms. Kristal. And we are reminding you to stay strong, smart, and bold, and enjoy watching the rest of these Girls Inc. STEM videos. Thanks, everybody.